we were under contract with the Ministry of Environment to actually do 7 of the major community watersheds in the Okanagan, including Trout Creek, which is what I'm talking about, which is a water supply for the district of Summerland and supplies most of the water for agricultural, commercial, and residential use. So the question was, what are the hydrological risks from the mountain pine beetle epidemic and associated salvage logging in Trout Creek? We found little published evidence that these were strongly linked to mountain pine beetle. We found a bit more that these were linked to mountain pine beetle, but I think what Sandra said confirms that. But so we were left with the 2 that we could analyze and which we thought was the main problem, which was sediment impacts to the water intake for the district of Summerland, both fine sediment and coarse sediment. Fine sediment, of course, affects the aesthetic appeal of the water. You get more microbiological activity and less can affect treatment, and coarse sediment can damage or cause increased maintenance costs of the intake. So in all watersheds, but particularly in Trout Creek, peak flows and sediment are intimately related because during those peak flows and floods is when most of the sediment movement happens. These 2 effects are intimately related. We could deal with them together. That's what we felt. So what was our methodology? And a lot of this, thankfully, Rita went over carefully what's the hydrological effect of a forest. And for the peak flow and sediment issue we're dealing with, it's really the interception of snow in the wintertime, and she's talked about, her and Pat and other people have talked about that quite a bit. So you have a green forest, and again, we've had a lot of good covering, and this is a mountain pine beetle attack forest. And I think what we've heard this morning over and over again is this has a hydrological function. There's actually, you're looking at 3 different things here when you look at, and we modeled each of those 3 things, so I'm going to talk about them a little bit. There's this area that obviously we all see, which is the red attack stand. This will soon become a gray attack stand, and it'll be a bunch of gray tree boles here with some branches on them. There's this level here, which is the non-pine component of the stand. This is you see the dominance up here. When this gray becomes gray, you'll actually see there's more green in there of non-pine stands, and they maintain their hydrological function through the whole life cycle of the attack as we model it. And there's a real healthy understory here. This is how we model it. It's a little complex, and all the dotted lines are worth thinking about. They're the confidence interval, and it means we don't know. As in all hydrology, we never know exactly what we're talking about. There's uncertainties, and there are always uncertainties, and we should acknowledge that. So just really briefly, this is Dave Huggard's, which Rita talked about, Dave Huggard's model. This is for a mountain pine beetle attack stand. Oops. This line represents the non-pine overstory, and this is the ECA. So this is what a clear cut has 100% ECA, maximum potential hydrological impact. Green forest has 0, and this is the effect of the non-pine overstory as we model it. It's continuous. In this case, it's about 35% non-pine. It reduces the ECA by 35%. That's right. It just leads into. This was what I showed you for the mountain pine. This is the ECA history over time of the mountain pine beetle attack stand. This is the ECA trajectory of the clear-cut stand. It starts at 100, and this has also been said this morning. It recovers faster. The planted stands recovers faster. At some point, it overtakes it. Incidentally, we consider this hydrological recovery right here at 20%. There's a big area here where the ECA and potential hydrological effect is considerably higher, and it lasts for a length of time. So that's basically how our model works. We do that this is Trout Creek. This is the H50 line, which we consider, this is the area above the H50, these high elevation, that are contributing snowmelt when the floods are occurring, when the spring freshet is occurring. So those are the areas. The pink is MSDM, which is the 70% of the watershed, or 80% of the watershed is above the H50 is MSDM, a little bit is ESSF, and a tiny, tiny bit of IDF, so mainly the MSDM. So we went in the field and we measured what is actually there. We did, I think, 550 plots or so in 30 stand sites in the 7 watersheds in the South Okanagan, focused on the MSDM mainly and the ESSF. So this is a different stand. This is a younger stand, and it's based on 80 plots in 10 stands, and it averaged 90% pine. It had much less understory. So you can see the difference between the mountain pine beetle attack and the clear cut isn't as much, and it doesn't last as long, and the clear cut overtakes it. 25% of pine leading stands in the South Okanagan forest are this type, and 50% of them are this type. And the rest are this is above the age 50, and the rest are ESSF. That's the stand level modeling. We roll that up into the whole watershed for different age classes, different biogeoclimatic zones. We take the usual watershed modeling things. We look at the existing conditions, how much has been clear cut, what kind of stands are there, other disturbances, fires. We put on the long-term retention that the licensees supplied us that will never be cut, but if they're pine, they'll die. They took total clear cut harvest of the pine attack stands. That's all of it. All the pine leading stands greater than 40% pine were clear cut. This is what we got when you roll up all the different stand types and the previous logging and recovery of stands for the Trout Creek watershed. Starting year 0 is the start of the mountain pine beetle infestation. The lower curve is unsalvaged. As if we don't cut anything anymore, this is what will happen with the ECA in the watershed over time. Oops, there you go. And this is salvage harvesting. The salvage harvesting takes 5 years to complete, and then it starts to recover. So there's a large area in here. For purposes of risk analysis, we put some levels of ECA hazard so we could run it. I'll go. And so when you're doing watershed assessment, and I don't have time to talk about this, you really spend most of the time looking at the watershed. Everything I've talked about, this is our whole watershed risk methodology. Everything I've talked about is in this first box up here. What are we doing to the forest cover? What's the ECA hazard? We run that through what are the watershed characteristics? How would they respond to that change in forest cover, that increase in water? Looking at drainage density, slope, flow routing, lakes, things like that. We take that result and run it through, get a flow hazard from that, and then we run that through the stream channel sensitivity. How sensitive is the channel to that increase in flow, peak flow that we expect? From that, we get a hydrological hazard, and then we ran it through all these other things here. We're just going to talk about water quality, consequences of water quality. And this is what we found. It's pretty similar to, in fact, it doesn't change much from the original ECA hazard. The risk of sediment, increased sediment due to the mountain pine beetle is moderate, and the risk from full salvage harvesting is high. Recommendations, basically, this is Forest for Tomorrow actually funded this. There is no treatment to mitigate the effect of the mountain pine beetle. Underplanting's been tried. It doesn't work. The critters eat the trees, which tells you it's a bit of a forest. The critters are in there where they're not in the clear cut. So what we're left in Trout Creek, one of the main things they could do was actually do rehabilitation on this channel. Would help a lot to reduce the risks. These kind of channel restoration activities we've recommended. But the main thing you have to do is manage this difference in here. That if you want to maintain it makes sense to cut the dead wood down, right? But the point of this is you have to manage that salvage harvesting. As has been said, other people said that today, you have to understand and model the non-harvest harvest EC implications the way we've done, specific to that local forest type and local watershed conditions. Focus harvest on pine stands with the least hydrological function. I mean, on a watershed scale, that's the younger MSDM, as I showed you. But locally, it's, the foresters need to go in, make a plan, and see what stands they're actually dealing with. There couldn't be pure pine stands in any of those biogeoclimatic zones. So basically, my conclusion is it's a forest. Like any other forest, it needs to be managed. In some watersheds, too much salvage harvesting will increase the short-term hydrological risks. And the last thing I want to say is what Lorraine said. This was our conclusion, but I think she really confirmed it. There's more coming, right? The mountain pine beetle is one big impact on the watershed because of climate change. So don't leave some ECA buffer, right? To get what an acceptable risk is, you have to take into account what's going to happen in the future. The mountain pine beetle is not the only thing out there. So use the precautionary principle. That's it.